Hello everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bulletin. Today, we're diving into a story that has fans buzzing with curiosity and excitement. From a song titled Wish to a mysteriously meaningful Christmas tree. Could Junho and Yoona be subtly telling a love story without saying a word? Are these just coincidences, or carefully hidden signals meant for those paying close attention? Stay with us and find out. Starting right now. It began quietly, almost invisibly, the kind of moment most people would scroll past without a second thought. A song title appeared in a playlist. A photograph surfaced at the edge of winter. A Christmas tree, softly lit, stood in the background of a post that didn't ask for attention. And yet, for those who were watching closely, something felt different. Familiar. Intentional. Wish to wish. At first, it sounded like nothing more than a poetic phrase. The sort of title artists choose when they want emotion without explanation. But timing has a way of turning ordinary things into questions. The song surfaced just as the year slowed into its final stretch. When reflections grow heavier and memories linger longer than usual. Fans listened, not casually, but carefully. Lyrics were replayed. Lines were dissected. And slowly, a tension formed between coincidence and suggestion. The song spoke of unspoken hopes. Of wishes layered upon wishes. Of waiting rather than chasing. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't declare anything outright. But that restraint was precisely what made it unsettling. It felt personal. Too personal. Came the image. A Christmas tree, elegant and understated. Framed in warm light. No grand caption. No explanation. Just a moment frozen in time. Within hours, comparisons began to circulate. Another tree. Another post. Another angle that looked just a little too similar to be random. Fans noticed the ornaments. The color palette. Even the time it was posted. Individually, each detail meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. The internet did what it always does, it connected dots. But this wasn't allowed. Chaotic speculation of rumor-driven headlines. This was quieter. Sharper. People weren't asking, "Are they dating?" They were asking, "Why does this feel like a story being told without words?" Junho and Yoona were no strangers to scrutiny. Years in the public eye had taught them how to move carefully. How to reveal just enough while protecting what mattered most. They had mastered the art of neutrality, smiles that gave nothing away. Answers that led nowhere. Which is why the subtlety of these moments felt so jarring. Nothing was confirmed. Nothing was denied. And yet, silence felt deliberate. Fans began revisiting older moments with new eyes. Past interviews. Shared glances on stage. Interactions that once felt professional now carried a different weight. There was no single piece of evidence, just an accumulation of almosts. Almost too similar. Almost too aligned. Almost too intentional. And in that space between certainty and doubt, tension grew. What if this wasn't coincidence at all? What if this was storytelling, not for the masses, but for those willing to pay attention? As December deepened and the year edged closer to its end, the conversation refused to fade. In fact, it intensified, not because of anything new that was revealed, but because of what wasn't. No clarifications. No dismissals. No attempts to shut the speculation down. In an industry where silence is often louder than words, that absence spoke volumes. Fans began to ask a different kind of question. Not are they together, but why now? Release something so emotionally charged at this exact moment. Why share imagery so intimate? So seasonally symbolic? Every move is known to be watched. A Christmas tree is never just a tree. It represents warmth, home, and above all, togetherness. And then there was the tone. Both Junho and Yoona seemed different in subtle ways. Not dramatic shifts, but small changes that only long-time followers would notice. A softer gaze in interviews. A cadence when speaking. An ease that suggested something settled rather than restless. They appeared eager to explain anything, and neither looked uncomfortable with the attention. That balance was what unsettled people most. If there was nothing to hide, why feel so carefully revealed? Speculation turned reflective. People began sharing why this possibility mattered to them. Not out of gossip, but out of recognition. Individuals who had spent years building careers. Enduring pressure. Enduring expectation. Finding something quiet, private. Forced. It felt earned. It felt believable. Still, doubt lingered. What if fans were projecting meaning where none existed? What if art was simply art? And a tree was just a tree? Skepticism had to confront one undeniable truth: this story wasn't being pushed. It was being allowed to breathe, allowed to unfold slowly, allowed to exist without confirmation or denial. Restrained, rare, almost defiant, gave the narrative its power. Toward the end of the year, another small moment surfaced. Nothing explosive. Just a phrase. A gesture. Something that echoed earlier details in a way that felt almost like a callback. For many, that was the tipping point. Not proof, but resonance. Because real stories don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they whisper. Whether this was a love story unfolding in real time, or a beautiful coincidence shaped by timing and interpretation, one thing was clear: people were moved. Drawn in not by spectacle, but by subtlety. By the idea that something meaningful could exist beneath the noise, untouched by headlines. And perhaps that was the point all along. To confirm anything. Not to deny anything. To remind us that the most compelling stories are the ones told gently, through music, through moments, through symbols that only reveal themselves to those willing to look closer. Wish to wish. And maybe, just maybe, to hope. By the time the new year arrived, the story had taken on a life of its own. What began as a quiet observation had turned into shared tension felt across fan communities, timelines, and late-night conversations. The most striking element remained unchanged: neither Junho nor Yoona made any move to clarify, correct, or capitalize on the growing narrative. In an industry trained to control every angle, choice alone felt radical. Silence, in this case, was not emptiness. It was space. Within that space, people noticed everything. A brief smile held half a second longer than usual during a public appearance. Eric quoted without context. A winter photograph posted and then quietly archived. Each moment, all enough to deny, layered itself onto the last. The effect was cumulative, almost cinematic. As if the audience were watching scenes from a film with no dialogue, only mood, timing, and implication. Some fans began to pull back, uneasy with how deeply invested the conversation had become. Others leaned in. Not because they wanted confirmation. Because the story felt oddly respectful. There were no leaks, invasive photos, no frantic denials. Just two public figures continuing their work, living their lives, and somehow allowing something intimate to remain intact. Restraint changed the tone entirely. This no longer felt like rumor. It felt like observation. What unsettled many wasn't the idea that Junho and Yoona might be together. It was the realization that if they were, had succeeded in doing what so few ever manage, keeping something meaningful untouched by spectacle. And if they weren't, they had inadvertently created a mirror for everyone watching, reflecting how desperately people longed for sincerity in a world oversaturated with performance. In interviews around this time, both spoke more about timing, about waiting, about learning not to rush answers. The words were generic enough to pass unnoticed by casual viewers, yet specific enough to resonate with those already listening closely. Nothing was said outright, but nothing felt accidental either. Then came the quiet shift. The conversation stopped escalating. Not because interest faded, but because it matured. Fans began speaking less about proof and more about possibility. Less about entitlement, more about boundaries. It was as if the story itself had taught its audience how to watch without demanding. That may have been the most shocking development of all. Because whether this was a love story unfolding or a coincidence interpreted through hope, it had already achieved something rare. It changed the way people engaged. It slowed them down. It invited patience. Perhaps that was the real narrative beneath everything else. Not a reveal waiting to happen. Not a secret waiting to be exposed. But a reminder that some stories are not meant to climax, only to exist. Quietly, meaningfully. Their own terms. As winter gave way to spring, Christmas tree faded into memory. The song blended into playlists. And the moment passed, not with resolution, but with acceptance. And in that acceptance, something unexpectedly powerful remained. Understanding that not all love stories need an ending to be real. This story gently comes to a close. What remains is not certainty, but feeling. Whether this was a love story quietly unfolding or a series of moments interpreted through hope, it reminded us of something rare, that subtlety can be more powerful than confirmation. and silence can sometimes speak louder than any statement. Thank you for taking the time to read and reflect with us. We truly appreciate your attention, your curiosity, and the care with which you followed this story from beginning to end. This has been Behind the Bulletin. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to sharing more thoughtful stories with you soon.